What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9. I'm bringing you some more gameplay commentary from the new Star Wars Unlimited TCG. This game is not out yet, but there's a mod that on Tabletop Simulator, unofficial fan mod, using some of the preview images to have people playing around with this before it comes out. I believe the release date's not confirmed. It is, I think, speculated to release in March of 2024, but this game it's very cool, and there's enough of a card pool and enough stuff going on that you can already have some interesting games. So we're gonna play one right here. So actually, there's going to be, I think this video is going to have 3 different games that I have recorded here. So these are going to be 3 games with I'm playing the new Energy Conversion Lab, which is a base that I was just highlighting there. It is a 25 life base instead of 30. So the generic bases have 30 life and no text. This one has 25 life, but once per game, you can deploy a unit with 6 cost or less with Ambush, which allows it to immediately fight an enemy unit. I play a Rebel Pathfinder, 2 cost 2/3 with Saboteur. My opponent plays Admiral Piet, 2 cost 1/4. Each friendly non-leader unit that costs 6 or more gains Ambush. So that's a unit that's going to be more relevant later in the game. And my opponent is playing a Tarkin aggression deck. So he has the generic aggression base, which is just a 30 life base, gives you a red aspect icon, and he has Grand Moff Tarkin, who can give experience to your units. It's kind of an interesting matchup here because the 2 leaders are very different. So Tarkin can give experience to your tokens, experience tokens to your units, giving them extra stats. But his actual fighting ability is very bad. Luke can shield your units, but it's more conditional than Tarkin's experience. However, Luke's fighting stats are really good. So it's sort of maybe a better support leader versus a better combat leader, and we'll see which one prevails. So I attacked his Piet for 2, then I play Admiral Akbar, 3 cost 1/4, restore 1. When played, you may deal damage to a unit equal to the number of units you control in that arena. So when I play Admiral Akbar, he deals 2 damage, which will be enough to finish off the enemy Admiral Piet there. It's 2 damage because Admiral Akbar does count himself for that ability as well as the Rebel Pathfinder. My opponent played a Cell Block Guard, which is a 3/3 with Sentinel, meaning that most of my units will have to attack the Sentinel instead of the base or other units. He gives it an experience token using Tarkin's ability. However, I play a Fleet Lieutenant, 3 cost 3/3. When played, you may attack with another rebel unit with a unit. If it's a rebel unit, it gets +2/+0. So this Fleet Lieutenant gives my Saboteur there, the Rebel Pathfinder, +2 attack, and his 4 attack then is enough to take down the Cell Block Guard. My opponent then plays the Super Laser Technician, 3 cost 2/1. When this unit is destroyed, you can put it into play as a resource and ready it, which is an interesting little thing there. It kind of ramps you up, gets your resources going faster. I put a shield on my Fleet Lieutenant with Luke's ability. My opponent takes the initiative, and I then decide, so I could attack the base with Akbar for 1, but I actually decide that I'm going to take down the Super Laser Technician instead. And that does mean the Super Laser Technician becomes a readied resource, but because my opponent already took the initiative, which ends your turn, there's not really an opportunity for him to play anything else. And I figure that in this case, it's better to do that than to give the opponent a chance to potentially buff that card. Maybe he plays a Snow Trooper Lieutenant, which is kind of the Imperial version of that Fleet Lieutenant, a little weaker stats, but it has that similar ability to send in a unit with +2. So maybe he would have that and would be able to trade with my Akbar or hit my base harder, or maybe he'll give it experience or something and it'll be harder to kill. So I decide that I'm just going to pick that off early when he can't really use the resource. He then plays another Super Laser Technician. And he is at the point where he will be able to deploy Grand Moff Tarkin. I deploy General Dodonna, 4 cost 4/4. Other friendly rebel units get +1/+1. And he then plays I Am Your Father against General Dodonna. So this is a 3 cost card. It deals 7 damage to a unit. Unless your opponent says no. And if your opponent says no, instead you draw 3 cards. So it's an opponent's choice card. Opponent's choice cards tend to be bad in these games because the opponent can always choose the effect that they think is less advantageous for you. And in this situation, I decide, you know what, I'd rather not have this guy draw 3 cards. I'm fine with him taking out Dodonna. Dodonna is defeated. I hit the base for 3 with my Fleet Lieutenant. My opponent deploys his Grand Moff Tarkin. I attack the base for 1 with Akbar. And the opponent decides he's just going to take the initiative rather than attack with Tarkin here. So I decided, okay, I'll play out R2. R2D2, look at the top card of your deck. You may put it on the bottom of your deck. Otherwise, leave it on top. 1 cost, 1/4. Very strong unit. R2 is actually one of my faves. So I see a Fleet Lieutenant on top of the deck, and I decide to leave it on top. I draw the Fleet Lieutenant and the Mighty Home 1. Home 1 is a very expensive unit, but quite powerful. However, it's expensive enough that I don't really want to use it here. Probably going to end up being my resource. So in this game, you draw 2 cards a turn, and you can choose 1 to resource, which then turns it into a resource you can use to play things later. I tend to think that you want to resource expensive stuff early and cheaper stuff late. Um, that home 1 is kind of an unwieldy card though at 8 cost, and because the other cards in my in my hand are very relevant, I end up resourcing the home 1. My opponent plays out a cell block guard, same as earlier, 3/3 with Sentinel, preventing me from attacking his other stuff. I take down the cell block guard with my Fleet Lieutenant, and because he has a shield token from Luke's ability, the Fleet Lieutenant takes no damage and actually just loses the shield instead. So these shield tokens are really useful. By giving a unit a shield, you essentially absorb the next source of damage that it would take. And in this situation, that's very handy because having a having that damage come through would have killed my unit. It would have been a trade, a 3/3 for a 3/3. But with the shield, I instead take it out and still have a healthy unit to continue fighting. On the other hand, sometimes those shield tokens absorb like a 1 damage ping from Vader, which is kind of low impact. So it's sort of an interesting effect where the shields are better against higher damage attacks than they are against lower damage attacks. I deploy Luke as a unit. He is a 4 cost 4/7, or I'm sorry, he is a 6 cost 4/7. Though costs don't apply in quite the same way to leaders. They just are able to be deployed at a certain point when you have that many resources. And when Luke attacks, he gives a shield to another unit. My opponent deploys General Veers, a 3/3 who gives other Imperial units +1/+1. I'm now going to use that new energy conversion lab. So I deploy the Fleet Lieutenant here. When played, I can attack with a unit. If it's a rebel, it gets +2. I can attack with Luke. Luke is strength 4 base, so I can now do 6 damage to Tarkin. And then Luke takes 3, and I ambush the Fleet Lieutenant into General Veers, defeating both of them. Now I think I misplay this slightly, and the reason is I end up giving the shield token to the Fleet Lieutenant that had already attacked. I believe, I'm not certain, but I believe the timing is such that I could attack with Luke, give the shield token to the Fleet Lieutenant that I had just deployed, and then take down Veers with the ambush attack and leave my unit alive. I believe that that's a possible move, though I'm not entirely certain, and it would have been advantageous for me to do. My opponent swings into Luke with the experienced super laser technician. Luke takes 6 damage. He only has, or it takes 3 damage, up to 6, only 1 life left. But I then play Luke's lightsaber. This is a huge reversal of fortune. It's a 2-cost attachment that gives you +3/+1, and when played, if the attached unit is Luke Skywalker, you heal all damage from the unit and give it a shield. So now Luke is back to full life and a shield and has more stats. That's a really big reversal of fortune and puts me in a much better position for this game. My opponent plays Colonel Yularian, a 2-cost 2/3 that heals your base for 1 when you deploy a green unit, and he is himself a green unit and he counts for his own ability, so the base is healed by 1 life. I take the initiative at that point, and we're going to move on to the next turn. I have the mighty buffed up Luke Skywalker there. So with his lightsaber, he is a 6/8, or I'm sorry, he's a 7/8, and he has a shield as well. I use the Fleet Lieutenant to take down Colonel Yularen. Once again, my shield blocks the incoming damage. My opponent plays a tie advanced, which is a 4-cost 3/2. When it's played, you may give an Imperial unit 2 experience, but because I killed Colonel Yularen, there's no Imperial unit on the board for him to buff up. I play the Vigilant Honor Guard, 5-cost 4/6. If this while this unit is undamaged, it gains Sentinel. My opponent gives an experience token to the tie advanced. I attack his base with Luke, hitting for 8 damage, or I'm sorry, for 7 damage, and healing and giving a shield counter to my Vigilant Honor Guard. And I then attack with my R2D2 for 1 damage. Look at my top card and choose whether to put it on top or bottom. I believe, I don't know for sure, but I think it was a card I didn't really want, and I sent it to the bottom. Um, I might be wrong though. R2D2 has that nice little filtering ability. Going into the next turn, this is looking pretty good for me. I have a very strong board on the ground arena. My opponent does have that nice tie advanced in space, but I have a pretty strong position on the ground, and I have a life advantage as well. My opponent plays a cell block guard, which can kind of delay my ground attack further. I play another fleet lieutenant, and I send R2D2 with +2 attack to take down the cell block guard. R2 takes 3, but with 4 life, he's still alive. I get to look at my top card. I see a restored Arc 170, a kind of efficient early game unit, but not something that I want. I end up sending it to the bottom of the deck just because we're kind of in a later game stage, and I don't really want the efficient small units as much as I want bigger plays. My opponent plays an Imperial Royal Guard, a 3-cost 3/4. It gets Sentinel as long as you have an official unit. And if you have Emperor Palpatine as a leader or a unit, it gets +1 defense as well. So this isn't a Sentinel right now, but it could become one easily if he plays one of those small Admiral characters or whatever. Or if he plays the not small Emperor Palpatine. So that's an interesting obstacle there. I believe I decided that I'd rather just deal with that before it potentially becomes a Sentinel and potentially gets buffed. So if he were to play Emperor Palpatine, not only would that become a Sentinel, it would also get 1 more defense, making it harder to kill. So I just take it down with the Vigilant Honor Guard now, who has a 4 damage attack and therefore could kill it now, but not if it were buffed. My opponent gives another experience token using Tarkin's ability to his tie advanced, now a 5/4. I hit his base again with Luke. Heavy damage there, another 7 damage and a shield counter on the Vigilant Honor Guard. The tie advanced hits my base for 5. I hit his base for 3 with the Fleet Lieutenant, and I feel like we're racing to an extent with my ground arena racing his space arena, but I have a way stronger ground arena than he does in space. My opponent takes the initiative. I deploy a System Patrol Craft, which is a 4-cost 3/4 with Sentinel into space. And the System Patrol Craft there is not going to win against his tie advanced with its buffs, but it might be able to just hold him off. My opponent then plays the extremely mighty Relentless, one of the strongest cards in the game. I believe it is a what is it? I think it's 9 cost, and it is an 8/8, and it blanks the first event your opponent would play each turn. However, it is too little too late. My ground arena can just attack and clear out his base, and that's going to do it for game 1. So in that game, I felt like I gained an advantage. I gained an advantage on the ground. He got a buffed unit with Tarkin up in space that I didn't like. I wasn't easily able to deal with. When he played the Relentless, I feel like his dominance of the space arena was basically cemented. But I had already done enough damage on the ground and had enough of an advantage there that I was able to press the advantage, close out the game, and get a win for game 1. So that's going to do it for game 1. Let's go on to game 2. We're going to be using, I believe, the same decks for game 2. So once again, it is going to be a Command Luke deck using the new Energy Conversion Lab versus a Aggression Tarkin deck using the generic 30 life base. It does actually have a name, but I don't remember the names for the generic bases, quite frankly. I think it's like something Caverns. Yeah. They're not the flashiest cards, so I don't recall exactly what they do. Or I know what they do, but I don't know their names. Okay. So going into game 2 here, I felt like last game went fairly well for me. And Tarkin's interesting. He can sometimes be really strong if you get a unit like ramping up quickly. it can be a big problem for the opponent. Like, maybe even like turn one, you play one of those 2/1 TIE fighters, and then you put experience on it with Tarkin. The ability to easily add +1/+1 counters and keep using that repeatedly is quite good. If you look at Luke there, he can only give a shield token to a heroic unit that you played this phase, whereas Tarkin's ability can give an experience counter to an Imperial unit even if you played it like at any point. It doesn't have that same restriction. So Tarkin can really be giving out experience throughout the game. You could do it every turn if the conditions were right. And that means that he can really generate a lot of value as a leader while he's just using that support power. Now, the advantage on Luke's side of things is that Luke is way better in combat. So Tarkin, once he deploys to the field, is a 2/7, and when he attacks, he can give an experience token to another unit. I believe it has to be an Imperial unit, but 2/7 and giving an experience token on attack is like, it's not terrible. It's better than most normal units, but I think it is the weakest leader in combat in the game right now. Whereas Luke is 4/7 and gives a shield when he attacks, generally a lot stronger in my opinion. All right, we're gonna draw up here. Luke also has nice synergy with that lightsaber, which we saw me play to high effect in that last game, giving him even more stats. And also that heal and the shield were big value. All right, so we're going to go into game two, and we're going to see what exactly is going to happen here. Looking at my initial hand here, I have a resupply, R2D2, Vigilant Honor Guards, Admiral Akbar, a wing leader, and a fleet lieutenant. So resupply, you just put this event into play as a resource when you play it. So you might think to yourself, why is it good to put an event into play as a resource? Like, you can pay 3 to get a resource when you normally just get them for free. The answer is that vigilance, it ramps you. So it allows you to get those. Ramp is a term for like resource acceleration in card games, and vigilance allows you to start getting resources on the board faster than your opponent, which potentially allows you to hit important later game plays before the opponent does. So, as a very basic example, if I'm playing Luke and my opponent's playing Luke, and I play a resupply and he doesn't have anything to increase his resources, I can get my Luke onto the field a turn before my opponent does. So that can potentially be a big advantage. Now, the downside, of course, is that those are resources that you're playing that don't go into any immediate unit on the board or anything like that. And so doing that is going to put you at a bit of a disadvantage in the short term, and the hope is that the resource will give you enough of an advantage in the long term to make up for it. So I'm going to play R2D2, allows me to look at my top card, send it to the top or the bottom, and then I give him a shield token with Luke's ability. My opponent played Admiral Ozzel. So moving into these are both like fairly standard early plays. Moving into the next turn, let's see how it goes. So I have some nice options here. The wing leader could give 2 experience tokens to R2. The fleet lieutenant could send the R2 in with +2 strength for a quick attack. There are several of these cards that give you a buff that allow a unit to immediately attack with buffed strength. And those can be really good because they not only do they give you the ability to take down a tougher target. So, for instance, R2 is a 1/4, Ozzel's a 2/3. Normally, R2 would take 3 attacks to kill Ozzel. If I buff R2 with a fleet lieutenant for that attack, it takes 1 hit. So not only does it give you the ability to like kind of reach out and hit a tougher target, but it also has a big advantage in that it allows you to have a tempo advantage. So the wing leader that I have in my hand could give R2 2 experience counters, which would also get him up to 3 strength to defeat Ozzel. But I would then have to attack as a separate action, and it would give the opponent a chance to respond. Maybe the opponent uses removal on R2 before I get the chance to make that attack. Whereas the Fleet Lieutenant only provides a temporary boost, but applies it instantly. My opponent plays an Emperor's Royal Guard here, a 3-cost 3/4. It has Sentinel if he controls an official, and Admiral Ozzel is an official, which means that in this case, I am going to go with the Wing Leader instead of the Fleet Lieutenant. So the Wing Leader to 3-cost 2/1 when played, give 2 experience tokens to another friendly rebel. The reason I go with the wing leader here for the 2 experience tokens on R2 is that I think that this is going to give me a lasting benefit. And because that Royal Guard is toughness 4, I'm not going to be able to kill it with just 1 buff. So I want to do the more permanent buff now and kind of build up to potentially take it down in 1 hit in the future. My opponent hits my base for 2 with Ozzel, and I then actually take the initiative rather than attack again with R2 because my hope is that I'm going to have R2 take down the enemy Royal Guard in 1 attack attack, and I want to keep my shield rather so that it will block the one fight rather than potentially hitting him twice, losing the shield on the first attack, and then taking damage on the second one. So now I play the Fleet Lieutenant that I had earlier. R2 attacks with +1 strength, going up to strength 5, and taking down the Imperial Royal Guard in exchange for my shield. And then I have a buffed and undamaged R2 still on the field. My opponent has Ozzel on the field still, and 2 cost 2/3 there, and can exhaust to play a unit. You still have to pay its cost, but it comes into play readied. However, if you do this, the opponent also gets to ready a unit if they want. My opponent plays another Imperial Royal Guard and gives it an experience token using Tarkin's ability. I put a shield on my Fleet Lieutenant, and I've hit his base with my Wing Leader. My opponent hits my base again with Ozzel, and I then take the initiative. Going into the next turn. So normally, Luke can only be deployed when you have 6 resources. However, this turn, so normally I would not be able to play him this turn because I'm only going to have 5 resources, but I've been keeping that resupply in hand, and I'm going to be able to play that resupply, go up to 6 resources, and get Luke out a turn early, which is maybe going to cause some trouble for my opponent here. I'm thinking about what to resource. I don't want to resource the resupply because that's my play for this turn. I don't want to resource the C3PO because that's the other play for this turn. So resupply, when it is converted to a resource, that resource is exhausted, unlike the super laser technician who is converted to a readied resource. But because it's an exhausted resource that you get with the resupply, I wouldn't be able to play a 3 cost. I would only be able to play a 2 cost because I would use 3 of my 5 available resources and have 2 left, and the new resource wouldn't help me. That at least for playing another, at least for playing something that costs resources that turn. So in this case, I hit his Emperor's Royal Guard with my Fleet Lieutenant, losing the shield, dealing 3 damage. My opponent gives it an experience counter, but it has taken 3 damage and it has 2 experience, so it has 6 life minus 3, 3 life remaining. And that means my experienced R2 can actually take down the Royal Guard with this next attack. The Royal Guard does deal a heavy 5 damage in return, but the 2 experience tokens mean that my R2 is still alive. I see a Vanquish on top of the deck, 5-cost event, destroy a non-leader unit. Very strong event. My opponent plays or deploys Grand Moff Tarkin as the 2/7. On attack, you may give an experience token to a friendly Imperial unit. I deploy C3PO. I still have 3 resources left. And I look at my top card. So C3PO, when you play him, you declare a cost, and then you can look at your top card, and if it has that cost, you can reveal and draw it. I already know my top card since R2D2 showed me that Vanquish, so I say 5, and I draw the Vanquish. My opponent plays a TIE Advanced, which is a 4-cost 3/2, and it gives 2 experience counters to a friendly Imperial unit when you play it. He gives those 2 experience to Tarkin, making Tarkin a 4/7. And Tarkin then attacks over here, takes down C3PO, taking 1 damage. Now, when I said his ability earlier, I slightly misspoke. It is you give an experience token to another Imperial unit, not a Imperial unit, so you can't give the token to Tarkin himself. However, I have that resupply, and playing the resupply can then bring out Luke. Luke's on the field. 4/7 on attack, you can give another unit a shield. I use Luke to take out Ozzel and shield R2. And I still have my Wing Leader. It might have been advantageous for me to trade the Wing Leader with the TIE Advanced before my opponent attacked with Tarkin, because once he attacks with Tarkin, he gives an experience token to that TIE Advanced and takes it out of range of my Wing Leader. So it might have been a bit of a mistake there from me. However, I'm feeling pretty good about the overall situation here. He has an advantage in space, but I have an advantage on the ground, and he does have more life than me, but I feel like the ground situation is favorable enough that it will likely make up for it. We'll have to see. Both players resourcing up. Another tie advanced, giving 2 more experience to Tarkin. Now this is a little nasty. So Tarkin now has 4 experience tokens, meaning that he is now 6'11", although he has taken 1 damage, so he's 6'10". Not something that I really want to see. Also, that 6 damage means that he can now take out Luke in 1 attack. So my Luke has 7 life base, has taken 2, so only has 5 left. Tarkin now hits for 6, but I counter with another wing leader, giving 2 experience to Luke. Now Luke has 9 life, which means that if he's hit for 6, he'll still be alive with 1 life left. So these experience counters are very relevant on both sides of the game. My opponent decides he's not going to go for Luke. Instead, he hits my base for 6 and gives an experience counter to that tie advanced, which means both of his tie advanced are now experienced and out of range of my wing leaders. The tie advanced is 3-2, the wing leader is 2-1. So normally, if those units fought each other, they would trade, but 1 experience token is sufficient to put the tie advanced into a state where it will kill the wing leader and then stay alive. I'm considering my options here. And I think I have a strong one. I use the energy conversion lab to play a unit from hand with ambush. I play the fleet lieutenant from hand with ambush. I'm going to use the fleet lieutenant's ability to buff my wing leader, and the wing leader takes down the tie advanced. It becomes 4-1 for this attack. I then send the fleet lieutenant to attack Tarkin. Tarkin takes 3 damage. Um, and that's definitely not going to defeat Tarkin, but it is some damage. My opponent plays Colonel Yularen, 2 cost 2/3, and when he is played, he heals your base by 1. Or I'm sorry, what he says is when you play a green unit, including this unit, heal your base by 1. So he does heal the base by 1 when he's played and can potentially heal it more later. I then hit Tarkin again with R2, even though Tarkin's hitting for 6 damage. It's all blocked by that shield token. Shield's very valuable when your opponent has big attacks, less valuable against small attacks. And I then am going to attack Tarkin with Luke, defeating Tarkin. And Luke takes a bunch of damage but is still alive with 1 life. He gives a shield counter to my Fleet Lieutenant, and then I'm going to have, I believe I have the Fleet Lieutenant take down Yularen as well. Yep, that's right. Fleet Lieutenant takes down Yularen. So I have now wiped the board on the ground and taken out one of those experienced units in space as well. I'm feeling pretty good about this situation. I see another resupply in my hand, and I'm going to resource that. It is not a good card late in the game. Unless you're still ramping up to something beyond your leader, resupply becomes a much worse card once your leader's been deployed, because a lot of that value is getting your leader out early, in my opinion, at least. All right, so I still have a big life disadvantage, but my position in the ground arena is very dominant. My opponent plays another tie advanced, his third one of the game, buffing his tie advanced there. But I have a kind of spicy counter card available on my side of the board. I play an out of aspect overwhelming barrage. So that is give a friendly unit +2/+2 for this turn, and then it does damage equal to its power, divided among enemy units as you choose. So I give Luke +2, and so Luke then gets buffed up, and he goes up to strength 8 and then divides his damage among those two tie advanced and takes out both of them despite the experience. Luke then attacks the enemy base. He still has the +2/+2 from the overwhelming barrage for this turn, and he gives a shield to the wing leader. My opponent has played a super laser technician, but I don't really care. At this point, I feel like I have such a board advantage that I'm not as worried about clearing this unit. I just want to push and try and close out the game. So I then attack with all my units into the enemy base, dropping it down to 11 life. And so I now have a life lead as well as a huge board lead. That overwhelming barrage got a lot of value. Let's see what my opponent can do to try and come back. Now my opponent does have the initiative, so he will get the first play. Resources a card, and we're gonna see he's accidentally flipping those instead of rotating them. Easy mistake. Easy mistake if you're unfamiliar with the hotkeys. He plays Emperor Palpatine, 8 costs 6/6, and when played, Emperor Palpatine deals 6 damage divided as you choose among any number of enemy units. So 1 damage to Luke kills him, 1 damage to R2 kills him. He's then going to also do 3 damage to my fleet lieutenant and 1 damage to knock the shield off my wing leader. So even though I had a really strong board, playing Emperor Palpatine wipes that board almost completely and knocks the shield off the one unit that's left. So I had a lot of strength there, but it was in units that did not have very much life left, and my opponent capitalizes on that with Emperor Palpatine. I play a fleet lieutenant attacking with my wing leader at +2. 4 damage gets into the base. The super laser technician attacks into my fleet lieutenant, and that the super laser technician is defeated but becomes a readied resource, which would allow him to use Tarkin's ability to buff up Palpatine. But I play the Vanquish that I had in hand from earlier, which is it just defeats an enemy unit, and that will clear out Palpatine. And so now my board is a lot weaker than it was going into that turn, but at the end of the turn, I still have a stronger board and more life. My opponent plays a copy of Prepare for Takeoff. Search the top 8 cards of your deck for up to 2 vehicle units, reveal them, and draw them. Put the other cards on the bottom of your deck in a random order. So, searching the top 8. This is an interesting card. So, it doesn't get you anything it doesn't improve your board state immediately, but it gives you card advantage. And the other benefit to doing this is that it allows some nice flexibility because early in the game, you can play it and get small ships if that's what you need. And later in the game, you could play it and get big ships. Most vehicles right now are starships and go to the space arena. Not all of them are going to be like that. So there's like the ATST and the AT-AT, for instance, but at least for now, there aren't all that many vehicle units other than ships. All right. So my opponent has searched up 2 vehicles. Let's see what he chooses. It is a Gladiator Star Destroyer and a Blizzard Assault AT-AT. The Assault AT-AT is 3 cost 9/9, and when it attacks and defeats a unit, any leftover damage you can do to another unit. Yeah, I believe it has to be in the ground arena. So it's a very nasty guy. I hit his base for 2 with the Wing Leader. My opponent decides to play out the Gladiator. Or I'm sorry, not the Gladiator, the AT-AT. So that's that terrifying, like super heavy unit, but he does tap out all his resources to play it. And I give the Fleet Lieutenant Luke's lightsaber for +3/+1. I don't get the shield or the heal because it's a normal unit and not Luke, but that does give me enough strength to attack the base and win. So interesting game there. I had a big advantage. He was able to reset me a bit with the Emperor, but I was able to remove the Emperor, build up a bit again, and even though he did get this really powerful AT-AT into play, I was able to finish off the base before he could really use it to run away with the game. He just didn't quite have time. And the reason that I attacked with the wing leader before the fleet lieutenant was he could have played that Gladiator Star Destroyer, which is a 6 cost 5/6, and it when you play it, it gives a unit Sentinel. So he could have played that Star Destroyer and given Sentinel to it, and that would have meant that my wing leader would no longer have been able to attack his base. So because I attacked with that first, he wasn't able to block me, and I was able to get both units through to deal the damage I needed. All right, well, that was game 2. My opponent is removing Colonel Yularen from his deck. He didn't find that to be that good, and I kind of agree. I think Yularen's sort of low impact. So Yularen, I'll remind you, is the 2 cost 2/3, and when you play a green unit, including him, you may heal your base for 1. That's a good ability, but right now we have such a limited card pool. We haven't even had half the cards previewed. And so there just aren't all that many green units you can even play. And as a result, that kind of aspect synergy ability isn't as strong as it's probably going to be once we see more cards. So my opponent decides to remove Yularen, and we're going to go into game three. Let's see how this one goes. Both players cleaning up from the previous game. And so it's still gonna be Luke with the energy conversion lab or energy conversion center or whatever it's called, and still gonna be playing against Aggression Tarkin, but this time no Colonel Yularen in the opponent's deck, and we will, yeah, let's start the third round. It's gonna be interesting. Gonna be interesting. I personally am a big fan of Luke. He might be my favorite leader right now. I think his ability to give shields is really good. Uh, and I think in addition, he has a strong presence. He has a strong presence on the board when he deploys. Um, Tarkin. I think is good, but I just don't like that his actual fighting stats aren't great. And my opponent has been compensated for that, for instance, by using the tie advance to buff him. But I do think that I like having a leader that's a little more splashy, and just like two base damage is the lowest of any leader. Uh, I believe Krennic also has two base damage, but can easily get +1 because he gives +1 to all damaged units on your side. Um, and so I'm not that fond of Tarkin's low fighting stats, even though I do recognize that he's good. All right, so I play R2D2 and shield him. My opponent plays Ozzel, similar to some of the starts that we've seen earlier. Thinking about what to resource here. I end up resourcing in a basic X-wing. I unfortunately don't have a lightsaber, wing leader, fleet lieutenant, something like that can buff up my R2 in the early game. So right now my opponent's ground situation is stronger. He capitalized on that further by playing a snowtrooper lieutenant, sending Ozzel in to attack my base with +2. I decide that I'm going to play the Cloud City Wing Guard, a 2-cost 2/4 with Sentinel, to try and shore up my defenses on the ground and get into a position where I can hopefully hold out longer, and draw into some stuff that will get me a stronger presence. My opponent gives an experience token to Ozzel with Tarkin, and I then take the initiative. I draw Home 1 and Luke's Lightsaber. Those are good cards, but Home 1 is a very late game card. I believe it is an 8 cost, and I do not have 8 resources. That's going to be resourced right now. Often, I think in this game, you're going to want to resource more expensive stuff early in the game and cheap stuff later in the game, just as a kind of standard tactic. So I use my Cloud City Wingguard to take down the Snowtrooper Lieutenant, dealing 2 damage. My opponent gives yet another experience token to the Admiral Ozzel there. I spend 4 for a System Patrol Craft, shoring up my space arena. 3/4 with Sentinel in space, so that should block the space arena off, stop any of those small fighters or whatever from causing me potential problems. However, my opponent has a really big play. He plays a resupply, and so now at 5 resources, he can now deploy Tarkin. And this is a big problem for me because right now my Cloud City Wingguard would stop his Admiral Ozzel, but he deploys Tarkin. He takes down the Cloud City Wingguard with Tarkin. He gives another experience token to Ozzel, and now Ozzel can attack my base. So I am rapidly taking damage here, which is putting me in a tougher spot than I'd like. I definitely feel like I need to stabilize and I definitely feel like I need to stabilize the ground arena. Now, the good thing for me is that I am going to be able to draw Luke Skywalker or I'm going to be able to get Luke Skywalker out this turn with my own resupply. So both of us using resupply to get our leaders out a turn earlier than they would otherwise. I play the resupply, so Luke is now deployable. My opponent plays a tie advanced, giving 2 experience to Tarkin. Strong play earlier, strong play here as well. I'm not happy with the damage that I'm taking on the base here. Now in this situation, I do have Luke's lightsaber in hand. So if my opponent were to attack Luke once I deploy him, it could potentially be a big blowout in my favor because the lightsaber could then be played to heal him and grant a shield. So I decide I'm going to get Luke out onto the field and hopefully get a big result with that lightsaber to improve the situation. However, I think my opponent saw this coming. He ends up playing Admiral Piet instead of attacking into Luke. Uh, I then I then am going to, I believe, attack with my System Patrolcraft to take out his TIE Advanced. So the System Patrolcraft is 3/4 and the TIE Advanced is 3/2. That means that I can kill it and remain alive, but if he were to attack with Grand Moff Tarkin and give an experience token to the System Patrolcraft, or to the TIE Advanced, it would then trade with my System Patrolcraft. So I decide I'm going to take out the TIE Advanced before he can do that. Tarkin attacks my base. I'm really low on life here, down to 12 life. And it looks like my opponent is just going for the base instead of attacking Luke, which is a good choice by my opponent. And so I think I have to just play out the lightsaber here. It's not really what I want to do, but I think I need to play out the lightsaber here and use that to get Luke his stats and his shield. It won't get the heal, so it's not maximum value, but the stats and the shield do mean that I'll be able to just start fighting his ground units more efficiently and removing them. Ozzel hits the base for 6. He's very buffed up. I have to take out Ozzel here. The reason is that I only have 6 life. If I were to take out Tarkin, my opponent can take the initiative and then hit my base with Ozzel and win the game before I have a chance to do anything. So Luke takes down Ozzel. The shield blocks all 6 of that damage, which is nice. My opponent takes the initiative. I do have R2D2 left, which means I can swing somewhere for 1. Hit the base for 1. See Admiral Akbar on the top. Good card to have because of his restore. Restore might be a key ability. So restore is whenever you attack, you restore that much life. Both this restored arc that I have in hand and Admiral Akbar have restore 1. So if I can get them out and stabilize a bit, they can potentially heal me sort of further out of the danger zone. The opponent has the initiative though. Let's see what he does. So he plays an Emperor's Royal Guard. And this is an obstacle for me because he does have an official in play. He actually has 2. So I will have to attack that Royal Guard before anything else. That means Luke can't take out Tarkin in this situation. I do, however, have a plan. I'm going to try to take down the Emperor's Royal Guard with my smaller units, which will free Luke to clear one of his bigger threats. In this situation, I can use a Fleet Lieutenant that I have in hand to give +2 attack to R2D2 for 1 attack. So the Fleet Lieutenant attacks into the Emperor's Royal Guard, hitting for 3. And then I'll be able to play Admiral Akbar and use the damage that he does when played to clear out the Royal Guard entirely. And R2D2's shield prevents him from taking any retaliatory damage. My base gets knocked down to 2 life by the experienced Tarkin there. And so in this situation, I can now deploy Admiral Akbar and use his ability to kill the Royal Guard. But I make a bit of a blunder here, I think. So I could have deployed Akbar using the Energy Conversion Lab, which would then allow him to attack and deal 1 damage to the enemy base or to Piet over there. And that wouldn't really be that much value, but it would give me Restore 1, healing my base by 1 life. And healing my base by 1 life would potentially be very relevant given how low the life totals are at this point. Or how low my life total is. My opponent's life total is fine. My opponent's sitting pretty at 28, whereas I am in trouble here. My opponent plays Grand Moff Tarkin, which allows him to search for his top cards for up to 2 Imperial cards. He searches and finds a Super Laser Technician and a TIE Fighter. Those are not very strong cards in this situation. So I'm a little happy to see that, but he still has a pretty strong overall advantage. So in this situation, Luke needs to attack to clear Tarkin and does, taking a chunk of damage himself and giving a shield. I think I decided that I'm going to give a second shield to my system patrol craft because the situation on the ground is very desperate, and I really need the space arena to hold out. The shield token wouldn't help me that much on the ground, but in space, it will hopefully reinforce me since I only have the one unit there. My opponent hits my base for one with Piet, and I take the initiative. So in this situation, what I need to do is I need to draw something that lets me kill both his units or put up a sentinel in the ground arena, and unfortunately, I don't do it. So I can attack before the opponent and clear out his Tarkin, but his Piet can hit the base for one and defeat me. And that is exactly what's going to happen. My fleet lieutenant takes down Tarkin, and then he swings in there with Piet, one damage to my base, and that's the game. So had this is an interesting game, I think, because it kind of shows the weakness of the potential downside to the energy conversion lab, which is with 5 less life, even though I had a much stronger board than my opponent at the end there. I still lost because he was able to attack aggressively enough and run me out of life. And had I played it better with Admiral Akbar using that energy conversion lab to get the one heal, I might have stayed alive a little longer. Had I used the generic green base and had 5 more life, I would have had some more time. Would that have won me the game? I don't know. Maybe my opponent would have gotten it anyway. But just something to consider. So 2-1, we do play another game, but I'm not going to put that here. This video is long enough as it stands. And yeah, so that was 2-1 with Luke against Tarkin, and some games that show kind of both the general gameplay, some strategy elements, and kind of both the upside and downside of the new energy conversion lab. I hope that was useful to you guys. I am going to be coming back later with more Star Wars Unlimited TCG content, probably doing a mix of commentary on other people's games and recordings of my own games with commentary. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy. Feel free to let me know in the comments below if there are any questions you had about the rules, things that I got wrong, strategy tips, or other stuff about the game. And also let me know if there's any particular content you might want to see, any leaders or decks or stuff that you think would be cool to preview, any game mechanics that you would like an overview of, that type of stuff. Let me know. All right, guys, that's going to do it. Tower number 9 signing off, and I'll catch you for the next video.